Welcome to the La Finca Coffee and Bakery podcast, where coffee beans and connections are brewed to perfection. Leading the way is our owner, founder, and CEO of the baristas, Lee Gonzales.
Are you curious about what a Mexican-inspired menu really means? Join us as we chat with the owner of Texas's top coffee shop, serving up delicious surprise in Frisco and Prosper that go way beyond your regular cup of joe. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Sofia Yvette, co-host / producer, back in the studio with Lee Gonzales. Lee, how's it going?
It's going well. It's great to be here recording another episode of our podcast.
Yes, most definitely. So, Lee, what does a Mexican-inspired menu mean?
So for us, we spent 10 years in Mexico, and while we were in Mexico, we were able to travel a lot of the country. And traveling the country, I thought I knew what the Mexican culture was. I thought I knew what the Mexican cuisine looked like. But I started tasting some foods that just were mind-blowing. They were amazing to me and opened up on another perspective. I will tell you, before I moved to Mexico, I really enjoyed Tex-Mex food. I thought it was really good. And after being 10 years in Mexico, I came back and I realized it was nothing like what the cuisine of Mexico looked like. And it just really showed me something new. And so as if you think about, we think certain things might be Mexican, but as I was going through different parts of the country of Mexico and tasting something like around Mexican Independence Day, which is recently passed, chile and nogadas. We think about chile poblanos, but when you have a filling that has fruit mixed into it, you also have pomegranate on it, you have a cream sauce on it. It's way different than what you've ever seen, but it's a very long tradition in the Mexican food cuisine. When you go to certain parts of the country, you go to Oaxaca and you have mole negro, and you start tasting the chocolate and mole, and you realize that all the ingredients they put into it and all the work that's put into it, and the just the variety of flavors that you get in that food, to somewhere like Guadalajara where you might get tortas ahogadas, or you might get something like carne en su jugo. And you start all these different cuisines, you start tasting that were from the different parts of the country, and you realize there's such a variety. And then one of the big staples and that we've really been able to share here is Mexican breakfast. Anywhere across the country, you will have anything for, chilaquiles are just a staple. You would have molletes, huevos, rancheros, and you could almost go anywhere in the country and you could find that for breakfast in anything from a very humbled on the sidewalk little restaurant to a very elegant high-end restaurant. And so when we started tasting these things and we moved back here to Frisco, we wanted to share that experience with our customers. We wanted to be able to, not everybody necessarily can travel around the country, maybe to the extent as we were able to, but what if we could share those experiences? Like, what is that culture was like? What is the significance? Like, if you think pan de muerto coming up at the, November 1st and 2nd for the Dia de los Muertos, and the bread that's made that time of year, a rosca de reyes that's done for King's Day in early January. And if we could bring those traditions and we could bring those flavors back and share them with the local community and give them a peek into what is the Mexican cuisine taste like, what is that authentic Mexican menu would look like, and bring it into the comfort of, their local place. And so that was the inspiration for us. And anything from if you think a café de olla, to chilaquiles, to pan de muerto, to a concha, to molletes, to whatever we can bring to, but we can bring those experiences to you. And our biggest compliment, and I heard this other day from one of our customers, is he got through eating breakfast. It was a gentleman that came with his son. They were from about an hour away. We're visiting, came and had breakfast. And the first thing he told me, I asked him how everything was. And his response to me is that I really enjoyed the food. It reminds me of my Mexico. He had been from Aguascalientes. That's where he was from, and that's where he grew up. He's been here in the States now, but it took him back to home for him. When people tell me this reminds me of when I grew up in Mexico City and my mom would make these for us. That's what we want to bring to our customers. That's what we want to bring to the table. And so when we talk about a Mexican inspired menu, it's not only what we serve, but those experiences that we want to serve along with it.
And how do you incorporate traditional Mexican flavors into your Frisco and Prosper coffee shops?
So one of the things is we intentionally, because in order to do it well, we pretty much make everything from scratch. So an example would be like a chilaquiles. We don't go and buy some tortilla chips that are already pre-made. We buy corn tortillas, we cut them up, we make our own chips. We don't go buy a pre-made green sauce or red sauce in a jar and just heat it up and put it on there. We make everything from scratch. So we'll buy epazote, we'll buy tomatillos, we'll buy Roma tomatoes, we buy onions, we cook them, and we make the sauce from scratch so that it brings that authenticity, those flavors that you find in those examples that I just mentioned to you earlier. And so we make our own breads, we make our own bolillo breads, we make our teleras for our torta. So a telera is the softer traditional bread that a Mexican sandwich would be made with. We make the bolillo bread, which is a breakfast bread that's, if you think about in the American breakfast, it would be equivalent to the Mexican version of toast for breakfast. Mm-hmm. And we do all those things, like I said, to bring that same flavor, that same quality in our menu and incorporate them into what we serve.
And what is the most popular Mexican-inspired item on your menu that keeps customers coming back for more?
I think I mentioned it earlier. It has to be those chilaquiles. I remember when we first opened up here, months before we opened it up, that I had people who would ask, "Are you really going to serve it the way you served it in Mexico?" Because we ran a place in Mexico for 6 years. And I told them, yes, we're going to bring it exactly the way it is. We're not going to change anything on our recipe. And they were just curious as it would really work well. And I remember the first few months as we opened up, we would get that question that they'd see that plate being taken out to a customer. And the question would be, what is that? What are those? And I remember out of curiosity, people would start ordering it, try to taste it and so forth. And I will tell you now, we're almost 4 years into it. It's our number one selling dish. It's what a lot of people come for. A lot of people recommend us for. It's because it reminds them, as I mentioned to you, of what they had at home, reminds them of that growing up in Mexico. And so that's probably the number one dish when we think about that sells on the menu that is Mexican, authentic Mexican.
Wow. So when you first came here, many people didn't know what chilaquiles were?
Well, I think it wasn't necessarily available in a lot of places. There were other parts of the Dallas area where you could travel 30, 45 minutes, an hour away, and you could find it maybe more regularly on the menu places, but very few places would serve it regularly, had it on the menu. And definitely not very many coffee shops had it. I would say we operate a lot more like a Latin American, European cafe that has a nice mix of food and coffee. And so when you come in and thinking, I'm getting a latte, one of the previous episodes we recorded how coffee, where it comes from and how to serve it. And so you have that person who's coming for coffee and finds this menu of food that just like, wow, this is interesting. And so we would get a lot of people who were one item brought them in and made them get familiar with the other items. And it was very interesting how it's become normal now. But I think at the beginning, it wasn't quite probably the combination most people expected.
Well, love it, Lee. We'll catch you in the next episode. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the La Finca Coffee and Bakery podcast. where coffee beans and relationships are always on the brew. Visit us online at lafincacoffeebakery.com. That's lafincacoffeebakery.com. Or drop by our Frisco or Prosper locations for a nurturing cup of goodness.